Welcome to Outside Views. Today we continue our deep dive into what it would actually mean for the United Kingdom to apply for EU membership again. Yeah, you heard me right. This is not a rejoin. There is no automatic way back. There's only the accession process. And as we have discussed before, this process is the same for every country that applies. And today we're covering Chapter 26, Education and Culture. At first glance, this chapter may seem less politically charged than others, but it plays a crucial role in EU integration. Education, cultural exchange and youth mobility are central to the European project. They strengthen cooperation, foster understanding among member states, and ensure that knowledge, skills and cultural heritage are shared across borders. For the UK, this chapter presents both opportunities and challenges. Post-Brexit policies have diverged in several areas, and reintegration would require alignment with EU frameworks for education, research mobility and cultural programs. So, what does this chapter actually cover? Unlike some other areas of the acquis, education and culture remain primarily under the competence of individual member states. However, the EU provides frameworks, funding and cooperation mechanisms to support education, vocational training, cultural exchanges and youth initiatives. The EU's education acquis includes Council recommendations on school education, vocational training, higher education and lifelong learning. It also includes legal provisions related to the rights of migrant workers' children to education and judicial rulings on non-discrimination and access to education across the EU. One of the most significant aspects of this chapter is the European Education Area. This initiative aims to create a more harmonized education system across Europe, ensuring that qualifications are recognized and that students and teachers can move freely between educational institutions. Before Brexit, the UK played a leading role in shaping EU education policy. British universities were among the most popular destinations for Erasmus Plus students, and the UK benefited significantly from EU funding for education and research collaboration. Leaving the EU meant losing access to these programs, creating barriers to student mobility and weakening institutional ties between UK and EU universities. The Erasmus Plus program is one of the most recognizable and impactful EU initiatives in education and youth mobility. It provides funding for students, teachers and young professionals to study, train and gain experience in different EU countries. Before Brexit, thousands of UK students participated in Erasmus Plus exchanges each year. The UK government decided not to continue with the program after Brexit, replacing it with a Turing scheme which lacks reciprocal agreements and offers significantly less funding. Joining the EU again would mean reintegrating into Erasmus Plus and restoring access to fully funded student mobility programs. Vocational training and adult education are also key areas covered by this chapter. The EU supports lifelong learning through various initiatives, ensuring that workers can develop new skills and adapt to changing economic conditions. Member states cooperate on education benchmarks and skill development strategies to improve workforce adaptability and competitiveness. And if the UK were to join again, it would need to align its vocational training policies with EU frameworks and ensure mutual recognition of qualifications. This would be beneficial for UK workers seeking employment across the EU and for businesses needing a more flexible and skilled labour force. And culture is another important part of this chapter. The EU promotes cultural diversity and cooperation through funding programs and policy coordination. Article 167 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the EU emphasizes the protection and promotion of cultural diversity, including support for the creative industries, cultural heritage preservation, and artistic collaborations. The UK previously benefited from EU cultural programs such as Creative Europe, which provided funding for arts and media projects. Post-Brexit, UK artists and cultural organizations lost access to these funds, limiting opportunities for international collaboration. Joining the EU again would restore full participation in cultural funding initiatives, helping to revitalize the UK's creative sector and strengthen cross-border partnerships. And sports is another component of this chapter. The EU's sport policy aims to promote physical activity, integrity in sports, and cooperating on issues such as anti-doping and match fixing. The EU sets broad priorities through its sports work plan, encouraging cross-border collaboration in professional and grassroots sports. Reintegration into EU structures would allow the UK to participate fully in EU sports initiatives, supporting athlete mobility and international sports partnerships. Beyond policy, education, culture and sport, they rely all on the free movement of people and ideas. The loss of free movement has significantly impacted academic collaboration, research exchanges and cultural partnerships. UK universities have reported declining numbers of EU students enrolling, and British students have found it more difficult to study abroad. Cultural institutions that once relied on EU funding and collaboration now face barriers to cross-border projects. And if the UK were to join the EU again, restoring free movement would be essential for re-establishing strong educational and cultural ties across Europe. Additionally, regulatory alignment would be necessary. The EU set standards for the recognition of diplomas and professional qualifications, ensuring that education credentials are valid across member states. Since Brexit, UK qualifications have lost automatic recognition in the EU, creating additional hurdles for British professionals seeking to work in the rest of Europe. Joining the EU again would mean aligning the UK's qualification recognition framework with EU standards, making it easier for students and professionals to work and study across Europe without bureaucratic obstacles. And this brings us to the broader picture of EU accession. Joining the EU again is not a simple return, as I said. It's an entirely new application process. And that process is governed by the so-called Copenhagen criteria. And these criteria set the fundamental requirements for any country seeking EU membership. A candidate country must demonstrate stable institutions guaranteeing democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and protections for minorities. It must have a functioning market economy capable of handling the competitive pressures of the EU. And it must show the ability to adopt and enforce the full body of EU law, including commitments in education and culture. Many people think of negotiations in general as two sides bargaining over terms. But in the EU accession, it's not that. It's a process of compliance. The EU does not lower its standards for new members. It's the applicant that must meet those standards. And the UK, if it were to apply, would not receive special treatment anymore. It would go through the same 35-chapter process as any other applicant. And so you know how long the series will be. Education and culture is just one of these chapters. And failure to comply means failure to progress in the accession process. And this is why the process is long and rigorous. There are no shortcuts, only full compliance. Joining the EU again means fully aligning with EU education policies, restoring participation in Erasmus Plus and Creative Europe, and ensuring that UK institutions meet EU cultural and educational cooperation standards. And there would be no opt-outs, no exceptions, no cherry-picking, only the process. And given the UK's current political climate, achieving compliance with this chapter could be one of the easiest, yet symbolically significant steps in joining the EU again. It would require political will, educational reform, and a renewed commitment to European collaboration that has been weakened since Brexit. So thank you for watching Outside Views, and if you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe. And please let me know in the comments what you think about this aspect of a potential UK application in the future. See you in the next video, and one of those is right here in the end screen.